Let's start with the holdovers. We have to start with that. I mean, listen, do you know what half our podcast name is? I mean, it is the director and actor from the movie we're about to review. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, so the Holdovers is the new movie by our beloved pair, Alexander Payne and Paul Giamatti. It's their first movie in 19 years since a movie came out that was not nominated for Best Actor, but it's a movie we definitely like called Sideways. And much like Sideways, this is a movie that stars Paul Giamatti as a nebbish, I don't know, sad sack loser who likes a lot of alcohol and gives a lot of bad grades to his students. And except he's not in San Diego. He is in Massachusetts or somewhere in New England in 1970. And the movie takes place over the course of a Christmas break in which he and only two other people stay on campus because of the big snowstorm. One of the other people is one of his students named Angus Tully, and he's played by Dominic Sessa. And he gave him a B+, so he wasn't like the worst student in the class. And it wasn't like Giamatti was in the bathtub writing no. His paper probably wasn't that bad. Actually, to get a B+ in Paul Giamatti's class, it probably was pretty damn good. Because he seems like a real asshole professor who gives a lot of bad grades. By the way, I thought that was the best scene in the movie when Paul Giamatti is talking about their grades and how they're going to have to study over the break for the makeup exam. That was a great scene and made me think, oh damn, this is going to be a good movie. The other person that is on campus with them is the school's head chef, Mary, played by Divine Joy Randolph. She is kind of going through some trauma of their own. They're all kind of going through trauma of their own because in various ways they've all been abandoned. And so they're kind of stuck there. And the movie's kind of like a little bit The Breakfast Club meets The Shining, meets a little bit of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Like there's elements of other movies here, even if it isn't exactly the scenario. And obviously there's a lot of Sideways in the movie too. Not surprisingly, the three kind of disparate personalities bond. There's various shenanigans that happen. There's a hospital visit. There's a Christmas party. There's a trip to Boston. There's a screening of Little Big Man from 1970. Good movie with Dustin Hoffman playing an Indian. So probably not appropriate for 2023, but I do remember liking that movie. In that movie, he ages 103 years, which has to be a cinematic record. Anyway, but I digress. The Holdovers. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think about this movie. I have to be honest, walking out of it, I was kind of like, this is not Sideways. There are parts that are good. There are parts that feel stretched out. It feels very TV, which is not particularly surprising because the guy who wrote it is a TV writer. It feels like it resolves a lot of issues in a very clean way. It feels a little too cutesy at times. It feels like lessons have been learned. And I don't want to learn lessons in movies, okay? That's why I get away from life to go to movies. I don't need lessons. Are you kidding me? I don't really believe that what would happen to Paul Giamatti in the last scene of the movie would really take place. What's fun about the movie, though, on the side of the ship that's good, is all the comparisons to Sideways. Todd, in that opening scene, he's got that wooden puppet thing on his desk. That's got to be out of Sideways. That was in Sideways. I don't think he has any wine bottles on his desk, but there's definitely there. I sort of thought that what wine is to Sideways, ancient Rome is in this movie. And it's not quite as entertaining, but there are just constant references to it. And it's such a through line throughout the movie. There's also a party scene where Paul Giamatti tries to get his game on with a woman. But this movie does play that scene a little bit different than Sideways does. And of course, there's the father losing his mind and a scene where Paul Giamatti has to lie about having written a book. I mean, that's really fun stuff. And I think the movie does actually a pretty decent job of making it different enough to kind of point it out. As I walked out of this movie, I was given 2.5. I've thought about it over the last couple of days. I'm up to 3 stars. I guess my bottom line is I feel exactly about this movie as I did The Fabelmans. I was really looking forward to it. I think part of my review is a little bit of disappointment that it's not as great as I was expecting it to be. Interestingly, both of those movies were my number 2 most anticipated movies the rest of the year, the last 2 years. It's not a great movie, and yet I can't help but like the character. I love the character of Mary in the movie. I think Randolph is the best performance in the movie, but I think Giamatti's obviously great too. It's a fun movie to watch. It's not a perfect movie. There are things I didn't like about it, but I think the world is better for it in the world than it not being in the world. And originally I had it on my list between Talk to Me and Air. Just not fair. It's better than both those movies. It's a 3-star movie. I enjoyed it. It's not perfect, but there you have it.
I like how you brought in the what movies it's between. It's like a BDM type of standing. I think that should always go on going forward. All right, I'll go next here. So I did watch this with Todd, and actually, out of the 6 people in the theater, audibly you could hear 4 of the 6 people laugh. Like there was actually a really kind of funny movie, a lot funnier than I thought. And I kind of leaned over to Todd. I was like, this could be either downsizing or this could be sideways. Hopefully we get something not closer to downsizing. I'm leaning it kind of closer to sideways. Nothing really can touch sideways. I think that's obviously one of our
or downsizing.
Great point. Obviously, Sideways is one of our all-time favorites. It's the top dog of movies for us. But The Holdovers, it gives us a really intriguing Paul Giamatti doing his thing once again. He's not doing Rhino or any big blockbuster movie. It's strictly about him and these 3 characters too. I'm absolutely on board with Randolph. She's definitely going to be nominated for an Oscar here for supporting. I think arguably you can get the 2 leads for The Holdovers too. What was the kid's name?
Dominic Sessa.
Yeah, that's it. And then Giamatti should be in the running for the best lead here as well. I really enjoyed the movie. I'm a little higher than you. I'm probably at 3.5 here. I thoroughly was not really. I don't know what I was really expecting other than it's Alexander Payne. This is kind of like a movie we have to go see and watch. And I pleasantly had a really good time with it. And just walking out of the theater a few hours ago, we learned a lesson, but there's a lot of like funny little scenes and elements here that are awkwardly funny. I loved how they just absolutely hated Giamatti, and he just kept going back to the Rome stuff every single conversation. Like it didn't phase him. Yeah, maybe it was a little too clean here with some of the resolution of the problems here. But I liked how all these 3 characters were flawed, and they didn't really care for each other at the beginning, but they kind of learned that, hey, we're all kind of damaged goods here. We all have things that we're working on, and they had appreciation for each other. At the end of the day, it's like I went in there and I wasn't really too anticipated for it, but I enjoyed myself a lot more than I thought it was better than what my anticipation was. So that's where I'm at 3.5 there. It's kind of like the opposite where you had a really high and it kind of disappointed you a little bit there. But I think Alexander Payne, I don't think I've seen all his movies, but I really really enjoyed this one here. And I think mostly because of the performance here, because it's really funny too. So that's where I'm at there.
I'm more with Adam on this, but especially because it was not on my anticipated movies list, because I think I said on that podcast, I don't think the trailer is very good. I don't think Alexander Payne is great at making trailers. I didn't think the trailer for The Descendants was very good, and that ended up being really good. But I mean, here Alexander Payne is absolutely doing his Hal Ashby thing. It not only has the look and production value of a 70s movie, but it has an unmistakable Ashby quality in its writing and in its sensibilities, and the soundtrack and the cinematography is great in this too. There was a ton of really great shots and of people in the snow. Dominic Sessa, I think, is great in his lead role, his first role of any kind that's listed on IMDb. He has this really old-fashioned movie star look to him, but he also has this emotional sensitivity that reminds me of some cross between Ezra Miller and Judd Nelson or something. Wow. I think he's definitely, he could get a fraud-assisted supporting actor nomination for this. I think he's terrific. And Giamatti, I think this might be his best performance ever. Rarely does he get the room to fully develop as a leading role. And here, Alex brings him back, and he has all of the Miles type quirks, but it's put in a package that makes him somehow unlikable and deeply relatable at the same time. And he also has this wonderful costume design to his thing that makes him look like an old football coach. He looks like Paul Brown yes. or Bear Bryant or something in his pea coats and suits.
Lombardi, that could be another one.
Yeah, exactly. And Divine Joy Randolph is a scene stealer, of course, but she has the most emotional depth in her story, which I wasn't expecting. When you have that type of character and that type of casting in a weird dramedy, it's rare that you get anything other than comic timing from it. And I think she is actually amazing in this too. It's directed great. I mean, it does remind me of other Alexander Payne movies. There's some Nebraska in there with the minor characters and the awkward situations you kind of encounter throughout it. And obviously tons of Sideways. The one thing that stood out to me, there is a bowling scene, but Paul's bowling stroke is the exact same as his golf swing. I mean, it's yes. fucking terrible. And I don't know. A couple lines were very similar to Sideways, and they have a thing about like a line about Paul Giamatti's book that he has or hasn't written, and he's having to come up with it on the spot, and his title is equally terrible. Yeah, I mean, I love this movie. It's slight and a little bit more predictable than a typical Alexander Payne movie, but he didn't write it. It was written by a TV guy, but it definitely feels like something he would do, and it feels like something that has the type of feel good like sensibilities that could actually win Best Picture, because nobody's going to dislike this movie. The characters are too strong. It's all about the performances, and it's operating at such a high level. Everybody is, and there's even a little road trip in there to the cherry on top. I think it is one of the best movies of the year, and I'm giving it 3.5 stars.
Nice. This is really solid. I like that this is totally where Miles is going to be in his life at the end of the day. He's going to be this crotchety, like old, like professor, inevitably, and writing like terrible book titles, and that's totally where he's going to be at one point in his life.
An alcoholic teacher at San Diego State.
Instead of like
he
gave up.
He Benjamin Buttons that shit though and goes backwards in time to 1970, because the reverse aging is probably about right in terms of where he'd be.
Well, it's like the de-aging is that's 2008. This is the multiverse, so he's hopped into the multiverse. This is the year of the age of the multiverse. I currently have this between Air, funny enough, and Palm Trees and Power Lines.
Wow. Well, okay. One of those movies is significantly better. and
I have this between Elemental and Past Lives. So.
Wow.
Oh,
okay.
Wow.
So I'm dealing with two people that like this movie quite a bit more than I did. So I'll try to be a little fair, but here's I guess I have a few beefs with it. Okay, first of all,
that's fine.
The setup is really great. I really like the first 40 minutes of the movie. I think though, when the other 3 or 4 boys leave the story, somehow the movie gets less interesting. And I'm not necessarily saying those boys were that interesting to begin with, but I think the issue is the first 40 minutes of the movie are kind of, you don't know where it's going. It's pretty, I mean, you get the idea of it, but you don't know what tone it's going to establish. Once those boys leave, you know the tone it's going to establish. And like I said, it's life lessons. This is the other sticking point that I have with it that I cannot resolve in my head, and I've been thinking about it for 4 days. The end of this movie, Paul Giamatti makes a big decision in this movie. He puts his life and his career on the line for someone. He makes a conscious decision to stand up for them. And again, now we're getting into spoiler territory a little bit, I realize, okay? 20 years ago, Alexander Payne would have written that Paul Giamatti would have made the other decision, or that he wouldn't have stood up for that character in that situation, and he'd have to live with the consequences. And that is a way more interesting ending than the kind of schmaltzy shtick of this movie. And
he didn't write it.
Well, okay, I get that he didn't write, but I'm just saying, like, I can't get past that. I can't get past that earlier Alexander Payne was a little more caustic. Okay, it's the same issue with Steven Spielberg and The Fabelmans.
You don't think Dominic Sessa's hair is any indication that he identifies with Angus and not with the teacher? Like that's the Alexander Payne character is
he's a
Angus.
Coward. Yeah, but he's a coward, and I get that the movie wants to show him evolving and growing courage like the Scarecrow, but this is not the Wizard of Oz. I don't care about life lessons. There's no fucking life lesson in Sideways. When he knocks on the door, we don't know if she's going to answer or not. That's the brilliance of the movie. This movie spells it out a little too much for my taste. However, I'm glad that the movie exists, and I think it's an interesting movie to think about rather than to actually watch, which is a very, not a great endorsement of the movie. But I do love how Giamatti kind of shows that maybe at one time he was passionate, but he grows so dispirited with the world that he's too cynical. I think he's performing in this movie. I think it's too much of a performance. It feels like Ratso Rizzo, whereas Miles feels infinitely more nuanced. So this might be his best performance ever. It's a crazy sentiment that I don't agree with, but he is very good in this movie. And if he wins the Oscar, of course that's great, because he's way better than Cillian Murphy. But it will be an overdue. It will be the Paul Newman Color of Money type award. It will be an honorary Oscar rather than, I think, a legit.
I think if you watch the movie again, you'll some of those things you're going to look past. I mean, because you love the bullshit holiday movies, and this has a little bit of that in it, but done in a way that's actually smart and not like normal Christmas movie garbage.
It's 20 minutes too long. If they cut out some of the stuff, okay, I'm never
gonna complain about my favorite directors making long movies. I mean, I'm so sick of hearing that. It's not too long. This is Alexander
little
Payne
long.
making his first movie in like 8 years. Like, no, it's not too long. I've been waiting 8 years for this shit.
Didn't you think that Paul Giamatti could have been played by Toby Jones, and that maybe would have been a more interesting performance?
No.
Or am I crazy for thinking? I'm crazy. Okay, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that was a bad take. But I mean,
That was a bad take.
Toby Jones.
Yeah, he'd be awesome. Who wouldn't want to watch that? I think Paul Giamatti's a little too sweet. I mean, you need someone who's just a little bit more of a dick. I think maybe
You
someone
can't
who's
get
British.
a Brit though. No, because
think you should
you're
get
in
a
New
Brit.
England. Like that's not the way it would be ever. I mean, it'd be more like Stephen Graham or something. Like that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I agree. That's sort of what I'm saying. I think, or like a Ricky Gervais. I think you need someone who's a little bit more of a flaming dick.
No, but he's a
Paul Giamatti's
loser. That's the
likable.
thing.
He is a loser, but he's also a dick. I don't know if I totally buy Giamatti's. I love him too much. I mean,
He got kicked out of Harvard.
For hitting someone with a car.
Really
Yeah, he
Murderer.
ran somebody over with his car. I mean, his history
great-
precedes him.
I also-
That was a great scene in that liquor store, dude. That was a great
I was
scene.
also prepared, if Todd really loved this movie, to throw out Todd. I think you're just thinking of a fantasy movie with Mr. Feeney and Corey on Christmas break. That's why you love the movie. That's what I was prepared to say if you gave it a thumbs up.
There's a
Because
little bit of
of
that
what
one
this movie is. And
detention.
again, I lose a little bit of respect for this movie because it's too TV. Boy Meets
No,
World would have
but
done an episode like
Angus,
this.
okay, but Angus in any other movie would have been like a shy, annoying character. It would have been played by Logan Lerman. It would have been something like that.
Yeah.
But instead he's an outspoken kind of asshole, and he's also really smart. Like that's a character you don't ever get in a high school movie. I think Dominic Sessa is like a revelation in this, and I think he's got a long career ahead of him. And that character's just so different.
I will like the movie more in a year. Come back to me. I'll give it another shot. Terry's gonna love this. He's gonna give us 4 stars. We know.
Oh, this is his number one of the year. Like this,
Yeah.
I was like halfway through the movie. I was like, there is 0 things that Terry is going to have issue with in this movie. It is pro teacher. It is pro like schmaltzy stuff. Everything about Terry's gonna eat every part of this up.
Except that Tom Hanks wasn't Tom Hanks could have played this role. Another reason why I can't fully get behind this movie. This could have been A Man Called Paul, you know?
Called Paul.
But I said this to Adam after the movie. I think Dominic Sessa is the main character in the movie. I don't think that Paul is actually the lead, but
yeah, this sparked a conversation that we'll have to have closer to a Pinot Award season. Which actors go which category, so we don't get fucked up.
You really are saying that Giamatti might be supporting? Are you crazy?
No, I don't think he's supporting. I think that the lead in the movie. I think the movie's about Angus and not about Paul. But
okay, well, that's a more fair point. I thought you were saying Giamatti should be supporting. I'm like,
no,
okay.
I think they're co-leads.
No
It's
sense.
like I said, it's like Glenn Howerton and Jay Baruchel. Like they're both leads. Like the movie's about both of them, kind of.
Yeah. From Blackberry. All right. Well, that's our review and thoughts on the new film, The Holdovers. We have 3 stars from Zach, who needs to go see it again. So we'll check back in a year. Set your calendars. And Todd and I are closer to 3.5 stars.